Hi, my name is John.
And my name is Lloyd.
And we're the hosts of The Pint,
a pop culture podcast.
Lloyd, if you had to tell any of the people out there that might be listening to The Pint for the first time about anything unsavory or disconcerting we might do on the show, what would you warn them about?
Well, sometimes we drop spoilers, and sometimes we swear like motherfucking sailors.
Fuck yeah, we do. You heard it from him. You've been warned.
Listen in.
You say something, boy.
I said you talk too much.
I had to make me shut up.
Welcome to a brand new episode of The Pint, a pop culture podcast. My name is John.
And I'm Keith, filling in for Lloyd.
And we are back from a nice vacation on Delos?
D-E-L-O-S. Pronounce it however you want.
Yeah. And we had a good time in Roman world, some nice times in medieval world, and then we ended up in the movie that we're going to be talking about this week. Let's just get right into it. Let's talk all about 1973's Westworld.
Yeah. Of those three choices, which one would you have chosen?
So that's funny. I posed this question to my girlfriend yesterday as we watched this. I think Westworld. I put it in tiers. Westworld, because I think I've always been fascinated by the Wild West. Medieval, because there's just something about it. Roman is last. Roman could be the best time, but also the worst time. Like, I'm afraid if I went to the Roman one, I'd end up having sex with a guy robot because, you know how those Romans ended up doing everything. They were debaucherous, and I don't know. It just seems like that would be the one where the wildest shit would happen. And I don't know if I would appreciate that one the most. Keith, which ones would you, what would be your ranking of the worlds?
I would do the exact order you did.
Yeah.
The exact order. Except I'd hope for some dragons in the medieval world. I don't think they'd be there, but
yeah, I think that'd be more like maybe fantasy
Tolkien world or
Tolkien
something.
world, yeah. LOTR world,
right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So if you're not aware of what we're talking about, in the 1973 film Westworld, the basic plot of it is that there is a resort place, $1,000 a day, and you go. And there's three different worlds, and they're occupied by people and robots, and they're essentially meant to recreate the era that you go to. There's Roman, there is Westworld, which is what we focus on, and then there's medieval. So if you go to Westworld, you get into shenanigans, you go to saloons, you get into gunfights. If you go to medieval, you joust, you duel. If you go to Roman, I don't know, you go to a vomitorium, maybe you become a gladiator. They don't focus on those two very much. Roman world especially, there's really almost nothing there. And what's crazy about this idea is, and this was made into a TV show a few years ago that was very popular on HBO, and I think it was more known for its headiness, like its big concepts. This is a little bit more simple. But what I think is the craziest part about this is that this movie was written and directed by Michael Crichton. And on the sly, Michael Crichton recycled this idea to much greater acclaim in 1993 with Jurassic Park. Keith,
yeah,
look, I get it. I just never thought of it before. Had you always been kind of aware at the very base level that like he just essentially double dipped on concepts?
Not until I learned that he did this movie. I hadn't seen this for the first time until like 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
I got the Blu-ray and watched it, and I was like, oh. And then I saw it. I said, wait a minute. This guy just ripped himself off. He replaced robots with dinosaurs and made the same movie.
Yeah.
The thing is, he got a real director the second time around.
Yeah, he's directed a few movies. We did one a couple years ago. Me, Larry, and Lloyd, the Tom Selleck, Gene Simmons opus, Runaway. Of course, you being a massive Kiss fan, I'm sure you saw it in the theaters like 9 times. All right, so Westworld, written and directed by Michael Crichton. Original screenplay. So he's known for, a lot of novels. Passed away in 2008, by the way. Known for a lot of novels, but this was an original screenplay. He had some heat on him because a couple years earlier, he had written the screenplay based on a novel of his for a film called The Andromeda Strain, which we just did a few months ago. So he gets hired to do this. If you're not familiar with his books, we mentioned Jurassic Park, Congo, Sphere, Eaters of the Dead. This guy is like Stephen King in the fact that he's an American fiction novelist who also, I would say 80% of his work has been translated into TV show and or movie, and a lot of them have been pretty popular. He thought the first cut of this movie after he made it was too long and too boring. So he cut a bunch of things out to get it down to a tight 1 hour and 28 minutes. A few of the things that he cut out, the bank robbery that we hear but don't see, there was a whole sequence that showed that. So there's a bank robbery scene kind of in the middle that our heroes hear happening, but they never show it. Well, apparently they showed it in the longer version. In this version, it's very hard to tell what's going on, but the two main characters are arriving at this Delos compound in a plane or a train. You can't tell. It's
some kind of hovercraft or something.
It's a hovercraft. And apparently there was actually a longer sequence that showed you that it was a hovercraft, but I guess he didn't like the effects of it. So all you end up seeing in it is it docking. But it's hard to tell what's happened. Did you have the same thing with me as where you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, a little bit, especially, they did the bad rear projection for the outside of the windows as it's going through the desert. And I couldn't tell if they were on some sort of plane or what.
Same thing, 100%. So it was filmed in Tucson, Arizona, the Mojave Desert. It was filmed in Cantil, California, Phoenix, Arizona as well. And it was filmed very quickly between March and April of 1973. I mentioned before that there was a television show on HBO from 2016 to 2022, 36 episodes, 4 seasons, got canceled in 2022. There was a TV show in 1980 on CBS, 5 episodes produced, 3 aired from March 5th to 19th of 1980 called Beyond Westworld. And in 1976, I'm kind of going backwards, there was a sequel film called Future World. Keith, have you ever seen Future World?
I have not. The pilot to the 1980 show is on the Blu-ray. I watched 10 minutes before I was like, no, I'm not doing any more of this.
I'm out.
Yeah, it's not good. It's 70s aesthetic to it. It was just, yeah.
Yeah, if it wasn't Bo and Luke Duke jumping into the General Lee and shooting off flaming arrows in 1980, I didn't really give a shit about it. So
thank you. Exactly.
This is the first film ever to use digital image processing. Yeah. So we get Terminator vision in this movie, although it's pre-Terminator vision. We get the vision from the Yul Brynner robot character, and it's just pixelated, essentially. It's actually kind of funny because you're like, how would he see anything with that vision? And then a couple scenes we get where it's in thermal or infrared, but this was the first time, and it was going to cost $2 million. But Michael Crichton knew somebody that worked at a lab that was willing to let him kind of pay less and work on it, and I guess kind of get credit for being the first person to do this. So there's 2 minutes of time in this movie, and it would have cost $2 million if they did it through the channels they were originally going to do it through. It didn't say how much they saved, but they said they saved a lot of money doing it this way. But that's interesting. First time for that.
And I found that effective. If they didn't put those POV shots in, it wouldn't have been probably as well. It's very Terminator that way.
100%. We talked about before we got on to the recording that this movie, obviously the story kind of recycled into Jurassic Park, but there are things like this is totally a Terminator inspiration. If James Cameron says this didn't inspire the Terminator, then I don't know if I believe him or not.
At least the way he directed Arnold came straight from the Yul Brynner performance, because it's I was laughing watching it. I was like, holy crap. It's like this. It looked exactly the same, the way the posture and everything.
Yeah. It kind of felt for 1973 to be, especially the last like 20 minutes of the movie, like a precursor to like slasher movies. It's a chase. The whole end is like the bad guy chasing the good guy, you know, keeping him on his heels and trying to kill him. It feels like the last 20 minutes of Halloween or something. All right, let's get into the cast of this thing.
All right.
I was just wondering, who are some of these motherfuckers at this party?
All right, so Yul Brynner plays the gunslinger. You might know Yul Brynner from the Ten Commandments, the Magnificent Seven. His character in this movie is based visually on his character from the Magnificent Seven. I have not seen the Magnificent Seven in a long time, but one of the things I read in the trivia of this movie is that the outfit he wears is either the same or very close to an outfit he wears in Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the first thing I thought when I was watching it the other night. Is like, wait a minute, he's wearing the Chris Adams outfit. I love the Magnificent Seven. I watch it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, did they do that on purpose or was that just coincidence? You know, because in the Old West, the bad cowboy was always dressed in black anyway. So,
The Man in Black, absolutely.
Right.
He was also in a film. I just wrote this down because I thought it's a great name for a film, and maybe just maybe it inspired the wrestler from the 90s, The Ultimate Warrior.
Oh,
yeah. Yul Brynner died in 1986, like 57 years old. You know, it's one of those things. I know he died in the 80s, but I would have thought he was older. But lung cancer, and he went on a whole thing at the end. Don't smoke. He tried to help people where he didn't help himself. So credit to Yul Brynner. Richard Benjamin plays Peter Martin. Richard Benjamin has been a director most of his career. He directed Mermaids, the Cher film. He directed The Money Pit with Tom Hanks, and he directed Milk Money with Melanie Griffith and Ed Harris. But he's also an actor. He was in Catch-22, Scavenger Hunt, and a movie that I watched all the time as a kid on HBO, horror comedy called Saturday the 14th.
I was hoping you wouldn't forget that one. I was going to jump in with that one. I loved that movie back in the day.
Me too.
Have you seen it recently?
No.
It's not good.
I'm thinking of it, and in my head I'm going, that's one of those ones that I probably should never go back to.
Don't go back.
Just keep the memories fresh.
Keep it the way you knew it.
So somebody else I didn't know. I knew Richard Benjamin was in this. I did not know that James Brolin is the co-star. He plays John Blaine. Their dynamic is they're friends. They don't really say it, but they're probably business associates and friends. Richard Benjamin's character, Peter, has never been to Westworld. And the John Blaine character has been to Westworld prior. So the movie kind of starts off where Peter has a lot of questions for John, and John's kind of like relaying to him how it's going to go. And we'll get into some of the rules when we get into the movie. James Brolin, of course, we talked about the Amityville Horror here. Pee-wee's Big Adventure, P.W. Herman. He plays P.W. Herman at the end. I know you are, but what am I? A comedy from a few years ago I love called The Goods, Live Hard, Sell Hard. And we can't not mention it because Keith's on the show. Keith's a huge Bond fan. But we talked about it very recently, I think on the Amityville show, and our upcoming View to a Kill episode over on the Pint Insider. But I never knew this. He was almost James Bond. Yeah, when Roger Moore was going to leave before View to a Kill. And I always thought there was like a deep rule where you had to be British. But apparently they were willing to break it.
Yeah, they were willing to break it. They still want to keep it that way to this day. But British or Scottish.
Yeah.
Sean Connery was Scottish, which is close enough, I guess.
I guess Great Britain is a better way to put it.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Yeah. I was shocked when I read that because I thought that was like a standing rule with Bond, was that you had to be, I know they talk all the time about, whether it's going to be at some point a woman or if they're going to use an African-American actor or something. But I still always figured that the rule was, even if they did that, you had to be a Brit. But apparently they were willing to go right in for James Brolin. And this is 5 years earlier than Amityville. And this is non-bearded, non-permed James Brolin. And man, he looks just like Josh Brolin. Like Josh Brolin, it is clear that's his fucking dad. All right, couple more here. Norman Barthed plays the medieval knight, mostly a TV actor, Dragnet, Gunsmoke, Barney Miller. Alan Oppenheimer plays the chief supervisor in the little control room there. This guy's mostly a voice actor, and you'd probably know him from a lot of the things he's done. He is the voice of Skeletor. He is the voice of Thundar the Barbarian. He is the voice of Mighty Mouse. So he is a voice actor, and he's done some stuff you'd know. Here's another guy you knew. As soon as I saw him on the train, I went, is that Dick Van Patten? Well, it is Dick Van Patten. Dick Van Patten plays the banker. That's his character's name. You might know him from Freaky Friday back in 1976, Spaceballs, but if you're of my and Keith's generation, the odds are that you know him as the patriarch of the Bradford clan on 8 is Enough.
Oh, I loved that show.
I loved it too. Willie Ames.
Yeah.
All the sisters were hot when I was a little kid. Yeah, loved it. Keith, you being the Star Trek nerd. I didn't know this. Miss Carey. Who plays Miss Carey in this thing?
I was shocked because I forgot she was in this. And when Majel Barrett popped up, I said, that's Majel Barrett.
Yes.
Majel Barrett Roddenberry. Nurse Chapel and Deanna Troy's mom. And the voice of the computer through just about every iteration of the original 5 shows.
Yep. Married to Gene Roddenberry from 1969 to 1991. His death, so no divorce there. She had done other things, episodes of Earth Final Conflict, Bonanza, and the FBI, but she is probably definitely, she is most known for being Nurse Chapel and being the voice of pretty much everything Starfleet throughout the original runs. So interesting to see her there. And then the last one I have is Victoria Shaw. She plays the medieval queen, another TV actress, Charlie's Angels, Ironside, and she also was on the television show The FBI. All right, let's get into this movie. Keith, we start off with essentially like we're at like an airport and we have a television interviewer interviewing people. What is the setup here, Keith?
That was an interesting scene. They're interviewing people about their experiences at Westworld or Medieval, the adult amusement park. I can see this being in Vegas. They never say where it is, actually.
Yeah, no.
It's out in the desert, so it might as well be in Vegas. Everybody's gushing over it, and they kind of tease up what's about to come, It's almost like how Jurassic Park with the, ooh, ah, then comes the blood and the running.
Yeah. Yeah, he interviews about 4 or 5 people, and they kind of tell you different things, like, oh, I was the sheriff of the town, right. I was the king's knight, I got to marry a princess. Like, so it kind of becomes very clear that this is it's a rich person, $1,000 a day. It's a place where you can go and live all of your fantasies, including your sexual fantasies, because the robots fuck here. And, we find that out in a little bit. So we get our 2 friends and they're on their way and they have a discussion on the hovercraft, basically explaining the do's and don'ts of this place and kind of what it's going to be like. And then when the hovercraft gets to Delos, you have these little trams that separate you by world and take you to your world. And when our 2 guys get there, they get brought to a, old saloon hotel, and they have all of the Western wear. And immediately Peter is kind of put off by it, right? Because I think he thinks that this was going to be like a modern amenities type of hotel, right, with a Western theme. This is not. This is the Wild West.
And I going through your setup there, I thought the exposition took too long. I just want to say that that opening scene with the news reporter and then the stuff on the what do we call it? A hovercraft.
Yeah.
By the time they get there, it's almost like 20 minutes in already. For a 90-minute film, it's burned a lot of time. I think they could have cut to the chase a little quicker. I also noticed, like you said, they go down these different tunnels to get to their worlds, how Spartan the sets were. Empty hallways, right? They found some abandoned building to use. And then I looked up the budget, and it's $1.25 million for the whole thing.
Oh, okay.
And they shot it in 30 days. So right away, you could tell this was definitely done on a budget.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was almost in stark contrast to what they had built up through the beginning of the film. Like, oh, we're going to get blown away here. This is going to be awesome. And they get there and it's like, An empty hospital.
And the part that I was confused by was like, John's been there. He obviously is friends with Peter. Why was Peter surprised that they were going to be wiping their asses with like fucking rags or whatever old timey shit they had to do?
Right.
You would have thought he would have told him like, look, this is not like the hotel is fancy and then we walk out into like a dirt road. This is like, you go there and you're going to be taking a bath in a barrel and, you're going to smell bad for a week. Like, it just felt weird that Peter seemed to not really get that right away.
Especially after that long exposition that could have been included in there, that like, look, when we get there, I thought it was interesting too, when they gave him the outfits, how like that was handled. It was kind of weird how it's almost like they were in like a Goodwill store.
Yeah.
Taking clothes off the rack and trying them on. It was kind of weird. It didn't feel futuristic at all. And I read that while they shot this in 73, it's supposed to take place in the far future of 1983. Okay.
I didn't know that. The far future, when 1983, when there were cars flying around everywhere.
Right, exactly. But I think once they're in the hotel, like you said, the movie starts moving forward.
So we get into the hotel, and let's just get it out there. The robots. There are robots intermingled with regular park staff. Couple of the things, I guess, about the robots. I couldn't tell. What is it about their hands that looks different?
I don't know. They kept saying, show me your hands, like to prove if you were a robot or not, especially when things went haywire. But they never quite showed a close-up or showed any detail to explain the difference.
The old man that shows them to their room holds his hand out, and James Brolin is like, well, that's how you know he's a robot. But like when he held his hand out, I'm like, I couldn't tell on my HD TV with the DVD. I couldn't tell. It just looked like maybe their hands were a little bit smoother.
I'm guessing they don't have fingerprints or age these lines and things like that. It's probably just flat,
Yeah, because, Brolin tells him, he's like, that's the only part they couldn't perfect. So that's how you could tell. I was waiting for him to flip his hands over them to be red.
Right.
Or like green, oh shit.
Printed circuits on the fingertips or something. Right. Yeah.
Now, how does the gunplay work?
Oh, the gunplay was cool. That if you point it at a human, it won't work. If you point it at a robot, it will work. So no humans are supposed to be in any danger from any of the weapons in any of the worlds. So I'm guessing the swords, I don't know how the swords would work.
That's where I was leading you to. So in Westworld, we're dealing with guns and shotguns and, typical Western weapons. And they show it that, like, he tells Peter, shoot me. So Peter points the gun at him and goes to pull the trigger and nothing happens. And he's like, there's a thermal sensor. And you could see on the revolver, there's something under the barrel. Okay, thermal sensor, it won't go off unless you have, high, if you have high body temperature, it knows you're a human. Low body temperature, you're a robot, it'll go off. The bullet will actually come out. They're having the sword fight, and I'm like, how the fuck does this work?
Right,
like,
exactly.
Because later in the movie, we get somebody being killed by a robot, with a sword. And as they were having their battle, I was thinking to myself, how does this stop? Like, how in Roman world, how does it stop, I don't know, a gladius from smashing someone's head in or something?
Or a mace.
Yeah, very, very strange. Very strange. So the guys go out and they decide that they are going to kind of hit the bar scene. And they're in one of the saloons, and as they're in the saloon, we get the classic moment where the man in black comes in. He basically starts a fight with Peter. What does he do?
He starts insulting him, telling him he talks too much and whatnot.
He bumps him too when he's getting.
That's right. He bumps him and spills his drink. That's what starts it. Right.
He comes up to the bar and is like, "You're messy with your drink," and Peter is scared shitless. And Brolin, the John character is like, go in, do it. And Peter, that's a real thing. Like, I was thinking about it. Like, even if you knew this was a robot, Keith, I think for me personally, do you think you'd be gung-ho about like killing this thing? Or do you think that it would be like really hard because it's not like it's like C-3PO. This looks like a person.
Right. No, I would definitely have an issue with that. And I'm surprised that John didn't show Peter, look, this is how it's done, and just blow the guy away.
Yeah.
I get that he wants to introduce him to the concept in the world, But, it might have helped Peter if John just said, this is how you deal with this. Bang. Peter would be prepared next time, maybe.
Yeah. Peter ends up kind of confronting him, says you talk too much, and we get the classic drawdown. And it's very quick. It happens there's not a lot of, waiting on it. They kind of line up to each other, and Peter gets the drop on him, and three shots or 4 shots, and blood shooting out everywhere, and the man in black just goes down, and we see these people come in and kind of pick him up and drag him out, and hey, Peter's the champion of the day. He's done his thing, and him and John kind of celebrate. They eventually end up celebrating by going to a brothel. And now this is like the next question. Like, beautiful woman, looks just like a beautiful woman. But I mean, like, I don't know. I'm not, I said, I was talking to my girlfriend and I said, I don't know, because there's that just unknown quantity of, it doesn't matter how real it is. I'm not putting my penis in her mouth. She's got fucking like a metal endoskeleton. Like, I'm not doing that.
Worse, the weapons are based on thermal signatures, right? So that means these things are cold.
Yeah. I wonder if the prostitutes are warmed up inside somehow. That's gross. I know. But I think I didn't watch the show, but I know that was a large part of the show too, is it was about like brothels and stuff like that. So they end up doing it. They each get their own room, and Peter has his girl, and James Brolin has his, and they both have a good time. And the next morning, Peter has kind of a conversation with the prostitute robot, and she just kind of leaves. And James Brolin's character is just shaving in the mirror, and I think Peter is having a bath, and then he finishes up, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the door, and who's at the door?
It's Yul Brynner again.
So at this point, and the movie doesn't tell you, we find out something's happening with the robotics in the movie, and we'll get to that in a second. But at this point, do you think that was a malfunction? Or do you think it was programmed to find them again? Or do you think that it was part of what was happening overall with this computer virus thing?
I think he was programmed as the villain.
Yeah.
That's why he was dressed all in black with the black hat. I think he's the black hat villain of this scenario that plays out. So I think we're still in the story a little bit. Although we did learn, because there are cutaways to the control room, that there's some minor oddities taking place in some of these robots.
Yeah, they're essentially talking about a computer virus before really there were computer viruses, or at least before they were a widespread thing. They're talking about how there are failure rates in every one of the worlds, and they're starting to notice that they're rising. And they're also starting to notice that they're traveling between worlds. One of them is, and we see this at one point, like I think it's in the medieval world, a guy kind of comes on to, the harlot, and she fucking like slaps him and runs away.
Right.
When in reality, in this scenario, she's supposed to just be docile and let him do what he wants with her.
Right.
Because he's paying $1,000 a day and he's a guest. But all of a sudden, it seems like we're getting a little bit of free will here, which should not be happening.
And they're noticing that they have to replace like the central processing unit in some of these because they're completely malfunctioning. Yeah. So they've got like gurneys with all these robots that they have to replace the processors in.
We go back to the gurneys multiple times, and they're in this big room that looks like almost like a big hallway. Right. And 2 times there's a fucking horse on a regular sized gurney. Right. I don't know if they know how horses work weight wise, but even a robot horse has got to weigh more than a robot person. And, you see these gurneys and there's like a saloon worker and then like there's just a full size fucking horse on its side.
Right. I did like the scenes before we get back into the plot, where they would come out and pick up the robots. They'd come out with the truck or and the crew would come out and they'd start picking them up and put them.
Yeah.
Kind of weird, I did like what they were attempting.
Agreed. We'll get to that, but agreed. So, Chris has got, Chris, I'm sorry. The gunslinger has got John, dead to rights. And all of a sudden, Peter comes in and just blasting. So now this guy, he's boned a robot. He already killed Yul Brynner once. Now he's got the machismo balls. We were kind of led to believe that Brolin was going to be the guy, right?
Right.
But now Peter Martin saves the day, blasts him, right? He flies out the window, I think.
Flies out the window. And Peter does, remember at the beginning, he said, can I do the thing with the gun where you roll the hammer or whatever? I'm not, I don't know the terminology, but, and then that's how he killed him this time. He's like, bam, 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 bam. He rapid fires him right out the window.
Hits the ground. They drag him away again.
Yeah, that's when the crew comes out with the thing.
Everybody comes running out, picks him up, takes him away for the second time. But this time, I think part of the story is, well, you killed a man, so you got to go to jail. So Peter ends up in jail, and he's just kind of not besides himself, but he's just like talking to the sheriff, like, I've never been in jail before. And this is an 1800s jail, and it's the old-timey sheriff. And
this is where I think the computer virus was starting to affect. Putting him in jail, I think, that's where it started to affect things.
See, my thought process was that was part of the story because, look, if you're gonna have the Western experience, what is the Western experience? Go to a saloon, play cards, get into a fight, kill a guy, have sex with a prostitute, get tossed in jail, jailbreak, which we get.
Yeah.
Right? But you might be right. You absolutely might be right. So he goes to jail. And I was confused by this scene because I didn't know that you can get DoorDash in 1800s jail.
I know, right?
So James Brolin goes up to what they would call a squaw at the time, Native American woman, and he says something to her in the road, and I think he gives her a tray. She walks into the jailhouse, and the sheriff doesn't say a word to her.
He does check what she has. She lifts up the opposite side of the napkin. Okay.
She lifts up the napkin. He looks.
Sees food.
Food and lets her slide it in. I've never been to jail. I've never been to 1800s jail. But isn't it the jail that feeds you? Like, did he order that? Was that like DiGiorno or Domino's? I don't know what happened there.
My assumption was because John's been there before. Like, he figures he'll just bust him out of the jail. Like,
yeah.
I thought, when I first saw it, I thought this was going to be a file, and he's going to file away the bars. Nope.
I thought he was going to get the Pee Wee Herman cake and pull the file out. I honestly didn't. I thought, and before all this happened, I thought, how is he going to file those bars off in this jailhouse without this officer knowing who's 2 feet away from him? Well, it wasn't that. We kind of pan to the outside, and all of a sudden the whole entire west wing of the jailhouse blows off because apparently it was fucking dynamite. And what? They go on the run, right, Keith?
Yeah, they go on the run. I do want to ask you.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this in the saloon fight and when the blowing up the jail. How do they put all that back together for the next day? They have other tourists coming, right? Or at least like for the next group, the next week. Like, how do they rebuild this? They have stuff gets destroyed.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I thought, how do they keep up? Like, because they show you how they take the androids off the streets and everything, but you got to assume that there's going to be some, like you just said. I don't know. I mean, I would think if these people are there, if they're doing it in groups, they said $1,000 a day. So let's say you're there for a week. Maybe they just keep everything the same for the week, and then maybe they have an off week. That's maybe how I would do it. Because look, when you're charging people in 1973 or 83, futuristic 83,
that's right,
$1,000 a day, and you have hundreds of people there, you could afford to shut down for 4 or 5 days and maybe rebuild your stuff back up to do it again. So yeah, I that's a very good question.
The operating cost for this park must have been off the hook.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So they get away and they end up going out to the bluffs, the mountains, and just kind of hanging out and kind of discussing how now we're living the outlaw experience. We can go back into town, but we're wanted men. And when they're out there, they encounter a rattlesnake, Keith. What happens with the snake?
At first I couldn't remember if it was going to be a real snake because I'd seen it before. I was like, is this a real snake? I don't remember but no, it's a robot snake, but it has the virus or it's malfunctioning and it grabs onto Brolin's arm and it won't let go. It
Yeah.
just hangs on there, and he's like smacking. He's trying to pull it off, and it grinds its teeth into him. And apparently, Brolin really got bit by the snake they used.
Oh, really?
They took the venom out of the snake, but they said the bottom teeth got in his arm.
When he pulls his sleeve up, now he probably really was bleeding because it looked good. It looked like an actual wound.
He was really pissed. I wonder if that's real.
Yeah, probably I'd be pissed off. I mean,
Yeah.
And here's another question too. I mean, in Westworld, like, why do the snakes have to have fucking fangs? I mean,
Right?
I get that it's a realistic experience, but like, I don't think anybody wants to be bitten by a snake in any way, shape, or form. Like, nobody who's paying $1,000 a day, you can't be shot by the bad guys, so you know you're going to win all those fights. But you got to contest with fucking rattlesnakes that can actually bite you.
Well, this is also part of the again, what you're saying before, we thought that John was going to be the hero here and Peter was the sidekick, and it's flipped because John's a really bad shot. He emptied his gun trying to shoot the snake and missed.
Yeah, Peter shoots it or stabs it. I can't remember.
He shoots it. He like blows right in the neck area, just blows a hole in it. They open it up and they look at the chips and they realize something's wrong.
The people we keep going back to the control room, and they're like, well, a snake bit a guest, and they're still like, look, we can't have this. We have to like figure out what's going on, all this stuff. So they're working on this as it's happening in real time. When do they encounter the Man in Black for the third time? Is it there, or do they go back into town?
Yeah, they go back into town, and that's where they're walking through the streets, and he comes out. He goes at John this time. And John says, oh, I guess it's my turn, right, to deal with this. Except
what happens, because it isn't so easy this time.
Well, John is slow on the draw, and he gets blown away. He gets shot, and he gets up, and he realizes he's actually bleeding, and he's like stunned. He says, I've been shot, and then the Man in Black shoots him again, and that's it. He's done.
It. Dead. Now, just because... Did they explain this? Because maybe I missed it. But just because the robots or AI, whatever you want to call it, are malfunctioning, does that make sense that the guns malfunction too? Like, why was the gun able to shoot him this time?
I was wondering that myself. Like, they broke their rules because they established these rules and then they just broke them for the convenience of the plot.
Even one line of dialogue where the guys in the control room say, like, we could see that the
safety protocols have been disabled.
Right. Like, he's learned how to shut the safety protocols off.
Right.
Like, we're all in danger now. But no, it's just they kind of go against their own rules of these guns can't kill anybody human. So, yeah, he's dead. And now Peter is just like, what the fuck? And as opposed to the last two times where Peter's got big balls, shoots him out the window, he fucking runs.
He takes off.
This movie, from this point forward, this is like maybe 20 minutes to the end, just becomes a chase scene of pretty epic proportions. Also, on the other end, we start to see pure chaos happening everywhere else. Keith, give us some ideas of like what's happening in the control room, what's happening in medieval world and Rome world.
Yeah, the control room, they find out they get locked in there. They can't get out. Which I can't believe they didn't even try to throw a chair through the door window or something like that.
The guy was elbowing the door, but he was actually, if you watched it, the door had a window in the middle. He's hitting the solid door. It's like this, Jesus Christ, guys.
Like he's hitting it where the latch would be.
Yes.
Trying to loosen and like, that's where I'm like, I'm like yelling at the screen, pick up a chair and smash the window in the door.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? And they realize that the temperature's going up and they're losing oxygen. So they're panicking for lack of, they're not panicking on screen, but you can tell there's a panic to these brilliant scientists can't figure out how to get out of a room. In the medieval room, the guy who's having his fantasy there gets in a sword fight with the Black Knight.
He gets called out by the Black Knight.
Yeah. That doesn't go so well.
It does not go so well. So this guy is there with his wife early on, and we kind of see that he has like thoughts, and his thoughts are he goes to medieval world and he is going to be the king and he's going to take the queen, but the queen also has the Black Knight, and they're going to vie for her affection, and the Black Knight calls him out, and of course he doesn't know anything's going wrong. He hasn't heard any of the news, the Delos newsletter yet. So he's down with it, but this guy is like kind of a fucking slob. He's burping. He's, you know, he's clearly not ready to fucking fight. I just burped, by the way. He's clearly not ready to fucking fight. He's like me. He's clearly not ready to fight. The knight says, let's do this. They start going at it, and the knight just fucking impales him with his sword.
Runs him through, yeah. It's not the Black Knight from Monty Python.
No.
That would have been a more preferable Black Knight.
That would have been a flesh wound, but this is... this guy's dead. So this is also kind of corresponding with we're seeing in Rome world. It's kind of like real Rome. Like, they're just killing each other. Like, they're just murdering each other in the streets. Robots laying dead everywhere, people laying dead everywhere. It's just violence upon violence. Meanwhile, Peter has kind of gotten himself out back to the desert area that him and John were at when he got bit by the snake. He runs across like an orderly or a guy that works for Delos
with a golf cart.
Yeah, with a golf cart who's fixing his tire. And he essentially lays it out and he says, these things are going nuts. And Peter tells him, look, the gunslinger is after me. Like, what do I do? And this guy is just the best because he's like, nothing. You're fucking dead.
There's nothing. We're all dead is what he says.
It's essentially the line in Terminator when Kyle Reese is like, it cannot be bargained with, and it will not stop. That's what this guy is. He's Kyle Reese. He's like, so then he says, look, if you're telling me my odds are nothing, what can help me? And the guy says, nothing's going to help you, but if you want to try, you could fuck with its vision or its hearing, right? Because it relies on those things very much.
And he points out a certain acid, like a specific acid to throw on them. Where is he supposed to get acid from out in the desert? Well,
even when he gets it, spoiler, even when he gets it in 10 minutes at the lab, I'm like, where did he get that? How was he able to hold it while laying on that thing without dripping it anywhere? But anyways, as they're talking, all of a sudden the Delos employee gets fucking murdered, long range. The gunslinger's up on the bluff and he's just shooting at Peter, kills the guy. Peter hops on his horse and rides back into town. Whole while the gunslinger is chasing him on his horse.
I did find it funny that the gunslinger's got precise, like he's a precision shot, except when he's shooting at Peter.
Yes, he snipes that fucking dude.
Yeah,
like he terminates him with extreme prejudice, and then Peter, it's like, what am I doing?
He can't hit him.
He can't. So Peter eventually rides back to, I guess, the hubs, but he ends up in Roman world. And when he gets to Rome world, he sees that like there's just fucking mass,
the fall of Rome.
It's just mass murder and people laying everywhere. Yeah, it's total destruction. He ends up finding this like giant kind of like pot or statue, and he realizes that there's a ladder. So he gets on it, goes down into it, and he ends up in the laboratories of the Delos corporation. And this is when he's kind of walking through and he's seeing all of the bodies lying on the gurneys, including another horse. So he sees all of this, and then all of a sudden we get the footsteps because we hear that the gunslinger is also down there now. So
he also finds that well-placed tray of acid.
See, I didn't, I must have took my eyes off for a minute. I didn't see him find the acid.
He finds a tray and there's like 6 bottles and they're all different kinds.
Okay.
And I hear Wayne's World going, oh, that information seemed a little extraneous at the time.
Yeah.
But here's the acid that guy told me to use.
I must have moved my head for a second because the first I knew of the acid is where it gets used right here. So the gunslinger is walking through the area Peter was just in. He's, looking at all these bodies on the stretchers, and he's probably confused by it as well because, it's that old question. Does he know he's a robot? Does he know this is where he ends up every day?
And he's not getting any thermal readings either because they're robots.
Right. They're robots. So they're kind of invisible to him. He walks by and we get the old classic Peter on one of the gurneys, looking over to the side. And, I think he walks by, but he makes a noise, I think.
Yeah, he makes a noise.
The gunslinger comes at him and Peter gets up, and without getting a drop on him, I would get half of this shit all over my lap. I'd be in trouble.
My hand would be burned off.
Yeah. I'd have like a fucking stump hand. He blasts him in the fucking face. He just hits him straight on in the face. And I gotta say, good effect.
Yes.
the smoke coming out from under his collar and his face. There's a scene earlier in the movie where they are looking at the Yul Brynner robot after one of the times Peter kills him, and they take the face off, and it's actually good. The effects are actually good in this. Like, they don't look terrible for the most part. So he's burning up, his face is burning up, and Peter takes this to get up and go. So he runs off, and he then ends up in medieval world.
Well, Chris pursues him into medieval world, and he's having trouble now because, as the caddy or the park worker in the golf cart told him, the acid would throw off his vision and hearing acuity. So the gunslinger tracks him into the big, what would you call it, a ballroom?
Yeah, it was kind of like the king's like hall, I guess.
Yeah, the hall, like where the great hall where they'd all eat or something.
Yeah.
Peter's hiding behind a big torch, and the gunslinger's having trouble he knows he's in there, but he can't really locate him properly. And then he finally does, and he comes at him, and Peter takes the torch and just lights him up.
This scene, to me, inspired Predator, when Schwarzenegger realizes that the Predator can't see him with the mud on.
Right.
Because you see Peter realizing that the torch is confusing him.
Yeah, oh, that's what it was, right? There was several torches confusing him.
Yeah. He's standing by one, and the gunslinger's just looking around, and he's looking right at Peter, but he sees he's not like locking onto him. He's not attacking him. And yeah, it just reminded me of the scene where Dutch gets covered in the mud, and the Predator doesn't see him, and Dutch is like, okay, this is what I have to do. So yeah, you're right. He uses the torch's cover and then pulls it off, and he just swamp things the shit out of him, man. He goes up. I
gotta say, that's one of the best stunt jobs I've seen with fire. That guy it was an inferno.
It was like one of those fires, like where he's dripping fire off of him. Right. Yeah. He was fucking burnt. So eventually, he just kind of like falls to the ground, and, Peter thinks he's vanquished him. Peter hears, some like, help from another room. I thought this scene was cruel, but kind of funny, but also kind of like, it's kind of like, I guess the catch-22 of this whole world in this movie is Peter goes into this room, and there's this beautiful, buxom young woman chained up to a cage, and, please help me. And he goes in there, and I don't know why he doesn't think that maybe she's a robot, because he's been surrounded by robots for the last like day or two. But he's like, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to get you out of here. And there's a giant urn of water, and he dunks in a fucking giant ladle and pulls it out. And she's like, no water. And I'm like, I know why she's saying no water, and you should, because you've been in a amusement park filled with fucking robots. But he ladles a big ladle full of water into this beautiful girl's mouth, and her head explodes. She just essentially starts fucking lightning bolting and smoking. And he's just like, God damn.
I had to question this too, because if you're going for realism at this park, and you're not supposed to really differentiate between robot or human, they can't drink water without blowing up.
Yeah, or they should have some kind of like fail-safe where they can ingest water and it goes somewhere like
right.
storage tank, and then they just piss it out later or something.
Sparks are coming out of her ears and everything. It was hysterical.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. He totally murdered her by accident. Another slasher movie thing. Man in Black comes back again. He's all charred up. He fucking jumps out, at Peter, not a real effective jump scare, but you can see that's where they were going with it. Not much happens. He literally jumps out at him and then just kind of stumbles off of like a little uprising and like lands on his face again, dead. And so now in most movies, you think Peter's going to get out. Maybe, now he did see earlier, we didn't mention this. He did see that all the guys in the control room were dead. So like, there's a lot of dead people there, but you would think maybe the next bit of this movie would be, Peter getting out and maybe a little bit of exposition or explanation of like, well, Delos got shut down. Universal horror movie ending. He sits down on the stairs in this medieval dungeon, and he is just like flashing back to hearing the pitch that the guy gave him to come to this place. Movie ends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of like that ending, actually.
I don't mind it either. I think I don't mind it, but I think there's a part of me that wishes maybe like 5 more minutes to kind of cap off on, even like we found out what happened. Somebody had uploaded this programming or something. I don't always need answers with everything, but this movie is very short on giving us answers to a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Corporate espionage might have been a nice angle, you know, to find out it was like, you know, Universal Studios sabotaging Disney or something.
Fucking,
right?
We find out it was Walt Disney's head in a glass jar, you know, with robot arms. Like, fuck that place. Take my money, $1,000 a day. Fuck you.
Which, by the way, while we were talking, I went to the inflation calculator.
Oof.
That is the equivalent. 1983, I did. It's $3,123 a day now.
Wow.
So that's a $15,000 5-day week.
Not for me.
No,
Not for me.
you shot at.
Yeah, I don't want to have sex with a robot that bad. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable killing something realistic. That would probably affect your psyche, even though you know. Yeah. All right, let's talk about the box office.
What's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
So Keith, I'm glad that you mentioned it because I did not write the budget down. So 1.5 million, you said, correct?
1.25.
1.25 million.
Yeah.
Back in 1973. Now, Box Office Mojo does not go this far back, so I just got some numbers here. This was number 22 in 1973. Now, I didn't mention it at the beginning as I usually do. I couldn't find a solid date of release. I found October 24th or November 21st of 1973. So making that much money, or at least number 22 in 73, it was only out for a couple months. But I did write down the top 3 movies and what they made that year. Number 3, a movie we did here on The Pint a couple years ago with our friends from Forgotten Cinema. It made $115 million in 1973. George Lucas, American Graffiti.
Love that film.
It is a good movie. I had never seen it before.
Labor Day weekend movie every year.
Okay. I've never watched it again, but I want to watch it again. It was my first watch when we did it on the show. That was probably 4 years ago. That was probably pre-COVID or during COVID. And I really enjoyed that. The thing that sticks with me with that movie, 2 things that I'll remember about that movie is the guy who played the hot rod racer should have been a bigger star.
Yeah.
He is, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He is so good in that movie. And that movie did the impossible and made Ron Howard a douchebag.
I know, right?
Like you think you know him from being America's kind of sweetheart director and being Richie Cunningham, who, you know, and Opie, you know,
right?
American, you know, classic characters. And his character is just such a shitbag to his girlfriend. And, yeah, got to watch that again soon.
It's a perfect Labor Day end of summer movie because it's their last day of summer vacation in the movies.
I'm watching it this Labor Day weekend. Keith, you've awoken a fire in me, my friend. Number 2, another movie that I saw very late, maybe 10 years ago. Fantastic fucking movie. $159 million. The Sting.
I love The Sting.
So good.
Isn't it?
So good. And then number 1, we did this a couple years ago on the Pint Insider. $193 million. Probably, for my money, the scariest movie ever made, The Exorcist.
Yep.
I am uncomfortable watching that movie. It makes me feel weird. Yeah.
I won't watch it. And I've watched it once. It scared the bejesus out of me. I'll never watch it again.
Yeah. I've gone back to it every once in a while, but it is not one that I drop in there easily because it does its job very well. It does its job very well.
Even when you know how the sausage is made, you still can't watch it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
It looks like Westworld in theaters had a $3 million gross, so it made money. You know, I mean, who knows what marketing and stuff cost back then, but all right, Keith, let's do this. Let's rate this thing.
All right.
Let's rock!
0 to 5, 0 being the worst thing ever, 5 being the best thing ever. Keith, before we drop this in here, tell everybody about Geek Time. Tell them all about what you do and all the fun stuff you do and your NFL videos and your movie and all that stuff.
Yeah, we're a cornucopia of everything. Whatever the mood fits, I guess. We do sports, we do movies, we do music, we do whatever. Either we critique it or we praise it or we just bullshit about it with no direction. I wish we could do more. It's a YouTube channel, Geek Time TV. But we, Edson and I just do what we can when we can. And got my buddy Bruce that I just reconnected with after 30 years.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He's down in Virginia and he does our sports shows with us. So we used to do a radio show in college together. So it's nice to reconnect.
Always popping up in my feed, man. You guys do. I think you do a lot of stuff. You're not like, one video every 3 months. You guys pop up quite a bit.
Well, we try, 'cause with the way YouTube works, you got to stay in the algorithm. And we did fall off because we went like months with hardly anything. So you got to be consistent. It's hard to do. We're all working and kids and whatnot. But I find it easier to make a 10 or 15 minute video now and then than to do like what you do. I don't know how you do it, man. I give you guys so much credit. I don't know how you consistently do this.
I think the audio is a huge boon because people can listen to us on in the car like I do a podcast, like maybe it takes 4 trips to listen to an episode. For me, like you just said, 10 or 15 minutes for videos, that's the sweet spot for me. If I look and see a video is like 45 to an hour, to me, maybe it sounds dumb to say, but like visually and listening, it just takes more concentration. When I clean my house up and stuff, I throw my ear pods in and I listen to podcasts while I do all that stuff.
Same.
Because it's very easy. It's like very easily consumable. I don't have to be looking at anything. I could be washing dishes. I could be doing this. So good on you for doing more of the shorter ones. Cause I think those are the ones that capture, the attention easier.
Yeah, I concur.
Well, Keith, what do you think about 1973's Westworld?
This was tough for me. I kind of waffled back and forth a little bit on this one. And I will say I'm grading on a curve for the time it came out. I think that, a modern audience looks at this movie and they probably don't appreciate the vision that went into it at the time, just because it's low budget and it's, pre-CGI and whatnot. So, it's not great, but it's good. And I do appreciate what they were trying to do. So I keep going between a 3.25 and a 3.75. So I'm going to give him 3.75 because I'm feeling generous.
Okay. All right. You're definitely higher than me, and that's not a bad thing because I think that this was well made. I think, again, I talk about it on the show all the time. Hour and 28 minutes. It relatively gets to the point pretty quickly. Yes, we do have the beginning, the first 2 segments of the interviews and then their discussion on the train take a while, but it's all building up to what we're about to see. So there's, it's a building block. Mm-hmm. And then once the action starts to happen, once they meet the man in black for the first time, it kind of starts to roll.
Yeah, it does.
And it just moves along from that point. I like the ending quite a bit. I like the chase aspect. I like the point where he kills Brolin and then it just becomes a chase. I like that pivot, like Brolin, like we said, you think he's the hero. He's the good looking guy. He's been there before. He's got all the answers. He seems like he's cool, but he kind of isn't so much we see, right? Like he can't hit the snake with the gun. Peter had to save him at one point. And Peter starts to kind of take over that role. But then once the gunslinger kills Brolin, Peter's like, fuck, I am out of here. He does something very realistic. It doesn't become like, what if this was Schwarzenegger? Schwarzenegger would have been hiding in, on the roofs of the houses in the jailhouse, taking out the gunslinger and fighting back and building giant logs that smash together. No, this guy runs. They don't try to do the superhuman, like, your friend's murdered. Now Van Damme's going to exact revenge on the gunslinger. No, he runs. So I like that bit of it. The special effects are actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I like when they show, when some of them are a little better than others. Like when they show the snake open and it's just got a giant circuit board in it. It doesn't look like it fits in there. It's kind of but like when they take off, Brenner's face and when he burns with the acid and when he burns, with the fire, it's all
at
really
the end
good.
when he's got no face. Yeah.
Yeah. When the face is totally gone, it looks pretty cool. It's pretty, I could see if I'd seen this as a little kid, it would have scared the fuck out of me.
Oh yeah, totally.
That being said, I think I'm going to fall right at a 3 on this.
Okay.
I feel like it's worth a watch. I feel like people who I've never seen the show, but I know the show is kind of, it's developed by, I think, Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan. I can imagine it's probably pretty heady. It probably takes the concept and tries to go higher with it. So I can imagine somebody who likes the show going back and watching the movie and going, oh, that was very simple. But I liked the very simple aspect of it. So yeah, I'm going to go with a 3. This is worth watching. 1973. It's Michael Crichton. And it's actually really worth watching just to go, fuck, man, this guy just ripped himself off to make Jurassic Park. Good on him, because clearly it's one of the most popular movies of all time. He basically took a movie that a lot of people only know of as a TV show from the last few years, don't even know it was a movie in the 70s, and he made one of the biggest movies of all time based on the exact skeleton of a story.
I kept thinking, like, how did they make 4 seasons of TV out of this concept? Once the robots go berserk, there's nowhere else to go.
I think the show, from what I've heard, is a little bit more of a slow burn, and I think it's a little bit more about the robots starting to become aware of themselves and like wanting to break free. Like we're things too. We're people too. Right. I think that's kind of what was kind of explained to me.
Become sentient and wanna.
Yeah, because essentially the idea, however you want to put it, is that these robots are slaves, right? Like they have to fight you. They have to have sex with you. They have to do your whim.
They have to die.
They have to die repeatedly. Right. They have to be destroyed. And I guess the show kind of banks on, well, I don't want to do that. And that's introduced in here a little bit with the virus, except it would have been nicer if, like you said, there was a answer to the virus. Oh yeah, corporate espionage. One line at the end of the movie, a news report reading over him sitting on the steps, right? Mm-hmm. Like just a news report reading over him on the steps where it explains that would have been like a nice little touch, but it's okay. I still give it a 3. So you know us, we're the Pint, a pop culture podcast. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. We come out weekly. Don't forget we have a Patreon.com/The Pint, $2.50 a month or $4 a month will get you 2 extra episodes a month. We're going to start our live streams again pretty soon. That has been you were talking about how sometimes it's hard to do this, that, the other thing. The live streams have been hard to kind of catch up with doing 6 episodes a month, but we get it done. So we'll get it out to you. And we're only on Instagram anymore for the socials. Threads as well, but I don't post anything on Threads. I think it just repeats from Instagram. So you can go to @thepintpop. Keith, one more time, tell everybody out there where they can find you.
YouTube.com/GeekTimeTV.
Check it out. Pretty Please with Sugar on Top. I love Keith. And I'd love you to get some more of that. Keith, you're going to be coming back very soon when the Manster comes back. We're going to do Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
I cannot wait.
And I still need some more fill-ins, so I'm going to call on you again very, 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 very
soon. I'm happy to do it. And, I'll tell you off.
Oh, okay.
I have time. I have time on my hands.
All right. See ya.
It's over, Johnny. It's over. Nothing is over. Nothing. You just don't turn it off.